a very common biblical theme throughout, the entirety of the biblical corpus is the idea that people who are overlooked, people who are broken, people who are in trouble are the very ones that God gathers up to create someone or something new. And it's interesting because the places where this happens is often when we're facing hardship. Hardship is often the place where formation takes place, and that's what we're going to see in 1 Samuel chapter 22. We're going to see David's cave at Adullam. We're going to see the gathering of the distressed, Saul's rage against the priests, and what happens when the anointed one who's being hunted actually becomes the center of a new group of people. And I'll give you one immediate action to help you see how God can build faithfulness out of pressure and pain. In this episode of Biblical Unlocks, this show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. So 1 Samuel chapter 22 continues the story that we saw in the previous chapters, where David is fleeing from Saul, who's the king, and David is actually going to be seen here gathering a band of distressed and indebted and discontented people in Adullam. Okay, so all of these people, they're not doing too great, let's just say that. And David brings his parents to Moab for safety, then he returns to Judah, and meanwhile, whilst all of this is happening, Saul is getting angry at his servants for not conspiring with him, and Doeg and the Edomite reveals David's visit to Nob. So that was what we saw in chapter 21. Very brief mention of Doeg the Edomite, and what happens next is that Saul orders the massacre of the priests, and Abiathar actually escapes to David with the ephod, and the chapter is actually showing something. How Saul's house has actually collapsed into murderous paranoia. And hopefully we'll be able to understand that, again, sin can develop into something completely unrecognizable if it's not checked. Okay, let's read verses 1 to 10. Focus here is going to be on David at Adullam, and we're also going to see the slaughter of the priests here. Actually, not here, it's going to be in verses 11 to 19, but verses 1 to 10, we're going to see David at Adullam, David protecting his parents in Moab, then returning to Judah. Saul's going to rage, and Doeg is going to reports David's visit to Nob. Okay, let's read. Verse 1, David left there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and all his father's house heard of it, they went down there to him. Everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him, and he became captain over them. Those who were with him numbered about 400. David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. He said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother come to you, until I know what God will do for me." He left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not remain in the stronghold, leave and go into the land of Judah." So David left and went into the forest of Hereth. Verse 6, Saul heard that David and those who were with him had been located. Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height, with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing around him. Saul said to his servants who stood around him, "Hear now, you Benjaminites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why all of you have conspired against me? No one discloses to me when my son makes a league with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as he is doing today." Doeg the Edomite, who was in charge of Saul's servants, answered, "I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub. He inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." Okay, a lot of things just happened there. So verses 1 to 2, we see David at Adullam, and the distressed, everyone who is distressed gathers to David Anyone who's bitter, indebted, distressed, discontented, they all gather to him, because David's cave has now become a refuge. And it's interesting, he is the king, he's the future king, but he's already functioning like someone who's a refuge for all of the people around him. The people around him as well, might I add, are not impressive, they're not stable, but they are broken, and that is exactly the point, because God is gathering future people around an anointed servant who knows what it is to be hunted, and he's going to gather around people who are discontented with their current situation. And the cave is important because it's the opposite of a throne room, right? It's like there's a stark parallel here, and yet it is the setting for loyalty, instruction, and future leadership, right? So the chapter is teaching, again, God flips the script often, and the kingdom begins where people would least expect it. The next thing we see is verse 3 to 5. David takes his parents to Moab because he doesn't want them to be in danger, right? So he takes them to Moab, and he understands the seriousness of the situation. He can't, like, if he cannot keep his parents safe in Judah, he entrusts them to be somewhere else. And Judah, David returns to Judah straight afterwards because, again, he wants to move under God's purposes. And Judah is the place of promise, even while Saul rules. And David actually understands something. If it is David's time to die, David will perish. But if God wants to continue his greater purposes through you, you will be preserved in some way or another. And what do we see in verses 6 to 10? We see Doeg the Edomite snitch on David. Now, why? Why does he snitch on David here? Well, it's interesting because he gives Saul just enough information to weaponize the truth, because Doeg's presence in the sanctuary, we saw it, right? I told you, you're gonna have to pay attention to this because it's gonna come up later. But when Doeg the Edomite saw all of the things that were happening, saw that the priest was actually helping out David, and saw that the weapon was handed towards him, we knew that something was going to happen later. And guess what? Saul's rage is public. He has internally corrupted his soul, right? He has done this. He has broken his relationship with God. He's cut himself off, right? And his heart is hardened, and now his hatred is spilling over into every other aspect of his life. Okay, let's read verses 11 to 19. Let's see what Saul does after Doeg's information. Verse 11. The king sent for priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and for all his father's house. The priests who were at Nob and all of them came to the king. Saul said, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." He answered, "Here I am, my lord." Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, by giving him bread and a sword, and by inquiring of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait, as he is doing today?" Then Ahimelech answered the king, "Who among all your servants is so faithful as David? He is the king's son-in-law, and is quick to do your bidding, and is honored in your house. Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? By no means. Do not let the king impute anything to his servant, or to any member of my father's house, for your servant has known nothing of all this time, much or little. You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." The king said to the guard who stood around him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand is also with David. They knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not raise a hand to attack the priests of the Lord." Then the king said to Doeg, "You, Doeg, turn and attack the priests." Doeg the Edomite turned and attacked the priests. On that day he killed 85 who wore the linen ephod. Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, men and women, children and infants, oxen, donkeys and sheep he put to the sword. Again, we're seeing the violence present within Saul's reaction. What do we see? Saul targets the priests because he thinks the priests have aided David's escape, and therefore they are enemies. But the real tragedy that we're seeing here is that he is turning against the very servants of God who should have been protected. This, again, it's not just a bad decision. Again, it's state violence. He's going through ultimate ends because he cannot stop David. Why does he want to stop David? Because he fears him. He has jealousy over him. And we see that there is something deep going on. There's a spiritual battle here. And he's giving in to the temptations of the evil one. And the chapter is actually really important in understanding Saul because it shows what rejection has become in him. Saul he's a murderous villain. He's murderous towards God's servants, the holy, the innocent, and his kingdom is disintegrating from within. You let sin enter into the door, it'll go sleep in your bed. And this is what's happening now. And you may think, well, this is so drastic. How can I apply this in my life? Well, just think about it. Everything starts from somewhere. And as it keeps building up, you start to make decision after decision after decision. And your decisions will inevitably compound into something completely unrecognizable. Okay, let's read verses 20 to 23, final part of the chapter. We're going to see Abiathar escaping to David with the ephod. Verse 20, but one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I am responsible for the lives of all your father's house. Stay with me and do not be afraid, for the one who seeks my life seeks your life. You will be safe with me. Okay, now hold on. David just says, you will be safe with me. He's literally being hunted down by the king. The king has basically killed 85 of the servants of God. And what makes him think that he is protected, right? What makes him think that? The reason is, again, because he knows, right, that God is protecting him. He knows that. And what's interesting as well is David's house is becoming, again, a refuge for the broken. People who are faithful but broken. They come to David. And the priest, Abiathar, he survives with David because, and it's interesting, we have two paths here that are being represented by the two kings in this sense. David, that's the king who's represented by refuge, and the other is a king that's descending into ruin. And there's a difference between both of them. All right, let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So 1 Samuel chapter 22 shows David becoming a refuge for the distressed, while Saul's fear literally kills and murders innocent blood. And in Christ we see David's fulfillment come to its ultimate meaning, because Jesus is the true refuge, and he's the one who gathers all the weary to himself, and he preserves the priestly hope that the world cannot kill. David's cave points towards a greater king whose people gather around, not when they are in abundance, but when they're in distress. And we see this new community of mercy around Jesus, which is why he says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He is the shelter for the hunted. He is the ultimate refuge for our souls. Alright, so how can we apply this chapter in our everyday life? I think the first thing is to remember that when we're in distress, there is a person who is with us always. There is going to be someone who's always looking over us, always next to us, always with us, who cares for us deeply in a way completely unimaginable or even unfathomable to us. And if in that case we can be like David, we can say, you can stay with me because I know that the Lord will protect me. I know because the Lord has preserved me thus far. I know because the Lord has for me an expected end, right? And this is what we can have hope in. We can know wholeheartedly that regardless of all the situations that we deal with, all of the trials and tribulations, we know that the Lord is always going to be with us. And that should give us hope. Okay, so we saw that David's cave at Adullam, it becomes a refuge for the distressed and the discontented, and that is going to be ultimately fulfilled in Jesus Christ. We saw Saul, his sin has turned into violent rage and murder, and that the slaughter that we saw is the final nail in the coffin, really, of the catastrophic collapse of Saul. He's no longer, not that he was, ever, but now we see clearly, it is as clear as day, that his jealousy has turned him, has completely seared his conscience, and completely turned him away from the wisdom of God. Next time we're going to see the wilderness pursuit in 1 Samuel chapter 23. We're actually going to see Keilah, the Ziphites, and what it means to seek God when you're being hunted. So you don't want to miss it. But that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.